The room had gone completely silent. Not the kind of silence that's empty or peaceful, but the kind that screams. The kind that falls heavy, pressing on everyone's chest, making it hard to breathe. I stood there, shaking from head to toe, blood trickling down my temple from the bottle Ryan smashed against my head, and still, I didn't back down. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this, and if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps more people become aware of the reality of elder abuse. Now let me tell you what really happened. My oldest grandson had just tried to throw me out of the very house I built with my own hands. He pointed to the door, chest heaving, veins bulging from his neck. "You're done here, old man. You're just a liability now. We'll take care of Mom from now on." I didn't flinch. My wife sat in the corner, crying softly. The woman I've loved for 52 years. Our daughter, her face was red, not from anger, but shame. She wanted to speak, but Ryan's presence kept her silent. They thought I was broken. That because my legs shake and my hands fumble, I must have lost my spine too. But that day, I showed them. Not with words. Not with fists. But with something more powerful than anything they expected, a truth I had buried for decades and a secret that changed everything. "You think you run this family?" I said, voice gravelly but sharp. "You don't even know what this family is. But you're about to find out." I pulled open the drawer under the staircase, the one no one ever bothered with, and dropped the dusty old envelope on the table. Inside it was everything: the will, the property documents, the business shares, the names. The truth about who built this legacy they were so eager to take over. And right then, as Ryan opened it and the color drained from his face, a knock came at the door. 4 men in suits. One of them carried a briefcase. Another had a badge. "Mr. William Carter?" one of them said. I nodded, slowly wiping the blood from my brow. "You're under investigation for financial misconduct, tax evasion, and conspiracy to defraud." The silence broke. Ryan laughed. My daughter gasped. But I smiled. Because this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. It all started 5 years ago. Back when I was still strong enough to climb the roof and fix a leak without someone calling 911. When I still drove myself to the local diner every morning at 6 a.m., sat at the corner booth, and had 2 eggs, bacon, toast, and a black coffee. No sugar, never sugar. Back when my grandchildren still called me Grandpa instead of the old man. I wasn't always rich. In fact, there were days when we barely had enough to split a can of beans and pretend it was dinner. But I had something that couldn't be taken from me: grit. In 1978, I started my own plumbing company, Carter & Sons. Except back then, there were no sons. Just me, a truck, a box of rusted tools, and a determination not to die broke. I worked jobs no one wanted. Middle of the night, pipes bursting, feces flooding a basement, I was there. Rain or shine, flu or fever. I'd show up, fix it, shake their hand, and go home with enough to buy groceries and pay one more bill. Eventually, people started to remember the name. Then came the sons, well, a daughter, my Grace. But I trained her like a son. Taught her how to hold a wrench, how to read pressure lines, how to bid a job fair and square. She was the only woman in our county running plumbing crews. And she was better than any man I ever hired. When her mother passed in '92, it was just me and Grace. We made it work. Then Ryan came along. Grace's firstborn. Charismatic, clever, but always reaching for shortcuts. Never wanted to get his hands dirty. I'd try to bring him to the job site, he'd complain. Say the work was beneath him. He had big dreams in real estate, investing, flipping houses. I let it slide. Maybe the world had changed, I told myself. By the time I turned 70, Carter & Sons had 3 branches, 37 employees, and a reputation you couldn't buy. Grace was running operations. I started stepping back. Then the murmurs began. Grandpa's getting too old. He's holding the business back. We should move the company digital, modernize. He doesn't even know how to use a computer properly. I heard them. Pretended I didn't. But I did. It hurt more than I cared to admit. One day I walked into a board meeting I was still on paper supposed to be leading and found Ryan at the head of the table. Not Grace. Not even my name on the welcome screen anymore. Just Carter Enterprises. No, and Sons. No nod to the old man. I said nothing that day. But that was the beginning of the end for me and the beginning of their undoing. Grace started pulling away. Quiet at dinners. Tired all the time. She was working herself to the bone to protect what I built while Ryan manipulated, lied, and flattered his way into power. Then came the incident. The one that changed everything. I got into an argument with Ryan about a bid for a city contract. He wanted to undercut the competition by using subpar materials from overseas. I refused. Said I wouldn't stake my name on something that could put people in danger. He said it's not your name anymore. 3 weeks later, I was hospitalized. Mild stroke. They said it was stress-related. That I needed to rest, take it easy, retire. I went home. Laid in bed for a week. Then I got up, pulled open the drawer under the staircase, and started writing. That knock at the door, 5 years later, wasn't unexpected. Because the charges weren't real. They were mine. Or at least, they looked like they were. You see, when I started writing 5 years ago, I wasn't writing memoirs. I was writing a trap. And Ryan had just walked straight into it. The moment the badge flashed in my face, I saw Ryan's lips curl into a smirk. A smirk that said, finally. Like he'd been waiting for this day, this downfall, for years. Must be hard, he whispered smugly, watching the empire fall apart in your own living room. But I just nodded to the officers calmly, even as my wrists were cuffed with shaking hands and my wife cried out my name. They led me outside, past the house I built, the rose garden I planted for Clara when we lost our second baby, the porch I replaced 3 times just so it would always look new. As the cruiser pulled away, Ryan watched from the doorstep like a man who just won a war. Only he didn't know. I planted landmines years ago. The cell was cold. Small. Smelled like bleach and old secrets. I sat there in silence for hours, leaning against the wall, eyes closed. Not because I was tired. Because I was calculating. I knew how this would look. The offshore account. The shell company in Panama. The fake vendor invoices filed under my old signature. The digital fingerprints traced back to my credentials. Everything the forensic auditors would find had my name on it. Because I put it there. It started 5 years ago when Ryan first accessed the company accounts behind Grace's back. A test, he called it. A $60,000 misplacement to an account he said would double by Christmas. I noticed. Didn't say a word. I let him believe he was smarter than me. That my eyes were too old to follow the zeros. I let him dig. Every time he tried to move money, I documented it. Every time he created dummy invoices or funneled profits into his side hustle, I shadowed the transaction with encrypted backups, legal timestamps, private investigators. I built a digital vault with everything, bank statements, emails, call logs, even video footage of him bragging about embezzling to one of his girlfriends. I didn't plan to use it unless I had to. But when Ryan tried to turn my own daughter against me, that was the trigger. You don't come for my blood and expect not to bleed. Flashback to 3 years ago. I just turned 78. I'd gotten a cake from the staff at the office, cheap frosting, store-bought, but they sang anyway, and I smiled. Then that night, Grace came over. She looked pale. Nervous. She brought paperwork. I need you to sign, Dad. Ryan said it's just a formality so we can take over more of the legal work. The lawyers already looked through it. I opened the folder. It was a transfer of power. Not just of the company, but the estate, the land, my accounts, my name. It would all go to Grace. But she wasn't the one who wrote the document. Ryan did. And he knew damn well she would never do it if she read the fine print. So he told her it was just routine. Had her fooled. But he forgot something important. I taught Grace how to read blueprints. I raised her to look at the bones of a thing. And when I asked her calmly, quietly, to go home and read every single page aloud to herself that night, she came back the next day in tears. She apologized. I didn't yell. Didn't shame her. I said, it's not your fault. But now we play the smart. We rewrote the documents. Planted new ones. Let Ryan think he'd won. And for 3 years, we let him build his fantasy empire, spending, stealing, lying until he buried himself so deep even God couldn't reach him. Back in the holding cell, the detective came in the next morning with a frown. You sure you don't want a lawyer? I already have one, I said. He raised an eyebrow. Then where is he? Right behind you. The door opened. In walked a tall, sharp-suited woman with silver hair and steel in her eyes. My granddaughter, Ruth. Top criminal defense attorney in New York City. Harvard grad. Worked for the Department of Justice before going private. She'd flown in overnight. "Hello, Granddad," she said, placing her briefcase on the table. "Let's clear your name." 3 days later, I was home. Not because of mercy. Not because they didn't have evidence. But because the evidence turned. Everything they found traced back to Ryan's digital ID. His passwords. His two-factor authentications. His laptop, his IP address. Even the security footage of my supposed signature being forged by his hand. We handed the detectives a copy of a secure drive I'd buried in a storage unit 5 years ago. They verified it within hours. Ryan didn't just commit fraud. He committed generational betrayal. Now here's where things turned violent. I was released on a Saturday morning. Quiet, no press. Ruth had it sealed. Grace met me outside and hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would crack. But when we pulled into the driveway, Ryan was there. Waiting. Red-eyed. Drunk or high, I couldn't tell. He came stumbling toward the car, fists clenched. "You think this is over?" he slurred. "You think you can ruin me?" I didn't flinch. "You ruined yourself. You senile old man. This was my company. I rebuilt it. I'm the future." Grace stepped between us. "You used me. You used everyone. You stole from the business, from the family, from Mom's retirement." "She's just a vegetable anyway," he screamed. That was it. I punched him. I don't care that I'm 82. I don't care that my knuckles screamed or that my heart thudded in my ears. I hit him so hard he fell backward over the flower pots. Then I stood over him, hands trembling. And I said the words I'd waited my whole life to say. "You told me I was too old to matter. But this family stands because of me. And it falls if I say so." He didn't get up. Didn't speak. Just lay there broken. Now here's the part they don't tell you about revenge. It doesn't heal you. But it frees you. In the weeks that followed, Ryan was arrested. Embezzlement. Wire fraud. Attempted elder abuse. He's facing 30 years. The company was restored. The real documents were filed. Grace became CEO officially. Ruth became general counsel. And I finally retired. Not because I was forced out, but because I chose to. But before I fade into quiet days and early breakfasts again, I want you to hear this, especially if you're older or feel forgotten. They'll try to silence you. They'll act like your bones are dust and your ideas are fossils. But age is not weakness. Age is ammo. And sometimes when you play the long game, you win the war with just one final move. 2 months after Ryan's arrest, the house was finally quiet again. Not the eerie kind of quiet that follows destruction, but a peaceful, warm kind of silence. The kind that fills a home after a storm when the walls are still standing and you realize you survived. Grace was in the kitchen humming softly, and Ruth had flown back to New York, promising to check in every weekend. But me? I wasn't done yet. Because if Ryan had turned out this way, if he had gotten this dark, so bold, so entitled, then somewhere along the line, I'd failed him. And I needed to find out where. You see, we love to blame the kids when they go bad. But sometimes the rot starts with the roots. So I started digging. I found Ryan's childhood journal in a box in the attic. I'd packed it away myself when he left for college, never opened it since. Yellowed pages, some torn. I flipped through the entries, at first, innocent things. I like dinosaurs. Grandpa fixed the sink. Mom cried again today. Then things got darker. I hate how Grandpa makes me do chores. Why'd I have to earn everything? He never gives me anything for free. He doesn't trust me. But then, one entry stopped me cold. If I were rich, I'd never work. I'd make everyone else work for me. One day I'll take Grandpa's business and make it mine. He's too old to stop me. He wrote that when he was 16. I sat in the attic for a long time with that journal in my lap. Not angry. Not shocked. Just tired. That night, I asked Grace to sit with me on the porch. "Do you think I was too hard on him?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. "I think you were hard on all of us. But I think I understood it." Ryan didn't. I nodded. "You were trying to make us strong," she continued. "But Ryan, he always wanted shortcuts. And you made him earn everything, which meant he always resented you. But why didn't he learn?" I whispered. "Why didn't he see the value in working hard, building something real?" Grace looked away for a long moment, and then said something that hit me like a hammer. "Because maybe he saw you work your whole life and end up alone, tired, in pain, and he thought, what's the point of doing it the hard way?" I looked at my hands. Calloused, veined, shaking slightly from age. She was right. To Ryan, I wasn't a hero. I was a warning. The days that followed were strange. Peaceful on the surface, but inside me there was a storm I didn't know how to quiet. My name had been cleared. My family restored. But part of me couldn't let go of the guilt. I'd taught Ryan what not to do, but I'd never taught him how to live. I was too focused on toughness, pride, grit, not enough on purpose or joy. So I decided to change that with the time I had left. I started small. I called up old friends I hadn't seen in years. Invited them for coffee. I took Grace and the grandkids on a surprise weekend trip to the lake house. The same one Clara and I used to visit before the cancer took her. We laughed, ate burnt marshmallows. I even let the kids teach me how to play some ridiculous phone game with cats in space. Then one afternoon, Ruth called me with an idea. Granddad, what if we turned Carter and Sons into something more than a plumbing company? I paused. More how? More legacy. We teach trades to young men and women, the ones society forgot, the ones like Ryan who never found purpose, only power. We teach them that work is sacred, that dignity matters, that age doesn't define your worth, character does. I swallowed hard. You think they'd listen to an old man? They'll listen to the right one. 3 months later, we opened the Carter Legacy Program. Free classes, paid apprenticeships, life mentorship from retired tradesmen like me who still had wisdom to share. We used the company's extra warehouse to run the operation. I gave my first speech in front of 60 students, most of them under 25. I expected them to roll their eyes, but they leaned in, every single one. I told them what I'd learned the hard way. That pride is not about being the loudest in the room. It's about showing up when no one else will. That legacy isn't built in a day. It's built in 1,000 small, silent sacrifices. When I finished, the room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Then they stood and clapped. And I cried. In front of all of them. Now you'd think that's where the story ends. Happy resolution, redemption, legacy. But stories like mine, they don't end that clean. Because the past has a way of circling back. And this time, it came for Grace. It started with a letter. A thin envelope slipped under our office door. No return address. Inside was a single sentence, typed in red ink. Your daughter stole more than you know. At first, I thought it was a prank. But Grace, she went pale, folded the paper slowly, tucked it in her purse, and said she had to make a call. I watched her walk out, heart pounding. What could she have stolen? Why was she scared? Later that night, I found her sitting in the garage, staring at her car keys like they weighed 1,000 pounds. I need to tell you something, she whispered. What is it? She looked up at me, tears forming. It wasn't all Ryan. Some of that money, some of the accounts. I helped him. My throat went dry. What are you saying? I didn't take money for myself. But I signed off on things. Looked the other way. I was scared, Dad. He said if I didn't help him, he'd push you out completely, move Mom to a home, sell the house. I didn't know what to do. I thought I was protecting you. I closed my eyes. I wanted to yell. Wanted to scream. But instead, I hugged her. Because I remembered how easily one decision, one desperate move can change the course of everything. That night, I didn't sleep. Because I knew what came next. Grace would be implicated if the truth ever came out. The company could fall again. The students we were helping, the families we were rebuilding, it could all be torn away. So I made a decision. One that would cost me everything. But save my family. At 4 a.m. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Grace. She'd fallen asleep on the couch in my study, exhausted from tears and guilt. Her hand still clutched the old photo of Clara we kept by the fireplace, like she was asking her mother for strength. I sat on the porch and lit the last cigar I'd been saving since my 75th birthday. I thought I'd smoke it when I handed over the company officially. When I retired for real. Instead, I smoked it knowing that by morning I'd be turning myself in. Not for what I did, but for what I was about to do. You see, in life, we all have to make a choice. Do we protect our name? Or do we protect our blood? The name Carter had been clean for generations. We were known in this town for integrity, for hard work, for fixing problems others were too scared to face. But legacies are not made of names. They're made of people. And Grace, She was my legacy. So I called Ruth. Told her to meet me at the office by sunrise. Told her not to ask questions, just come. When she arrived, bleary-eyed and clutching a travel mug, I was already at my desk with every document laid out. The original files, the paper trail, but also a new confession, written in my hand, signed, stamped. "What's this?" Ruth asked, frowning. "I'm going to take the fall." She stepped back. "Granddad, no. We just cleared your name. You're finally free." "No," I said, calm but firm. "I'm finally awake. I spent my whole life protecting the business, the brand, and somehow, in the process, I forgot to protect my own daughter. She made mistakes, yes, but out of fear, out of love. She broke the law. So did I once. The only difference is, I didn't get caught." Ruth walked over and grabbed the confession. Her hands trembled as she read. "Granddad, if you do this, there's no going back." I looked her in the eye. "Legacy isn't what you leave for your family. It's what you leave in them. Grace doesn't need another punishment. She needs freedom." Ruth closed her eyes, fighting emotion. And then she nodded. I walked into the district attorney's office at 10 a.m. sharp, wore my best suit, shaved, held my head high. "I'd like to make a statement," I said to the clerk. They led me in. I handed over the documents. The confession was airtight. It claimed that I orchestrated a portion of the false accounting to shield Ryan and that Grace had nothing to do with it. I took responsibility for the co-signed transfers, the altered paperwork, everything. By the time the interview was over, the DA said they'd consider leniency due to my age and prior contributions to the community. But charges were likely. I was ready. Or so I thought. When I got home that night, Grace was waiting on the porch. Eyes red. Jaw tight. "You did it, didn't you?" she said. I nodded. She looked at me like she didn't know whether to hug me or scream. "You should have let me face it, Dad. I made those choices." "I know. Then why?" "Because I made a bigger one," I said softly. "I raised you to believe that you had to earn love, that everything in life came with a price. And I forgot to show you that betrayal love has no receipt. You don't pay for it. You protect it." She didn't speak for a long time. Then she collapsed into my arms. And we stood there, two grown people finally understanding each other for the first time in decades. But of course, nothing stays quiet for long. Because 2 weeks later, Ruth knocked on my door with a storm in her eyes. "I found something," she said, breathless. She dropped a USB stick on the table. I plugged it in. And what I saw nearly made my knees buckle. It was a hidden folder from Ryan's personal email archives buried deep. Ruth had kept digging after something didn't sit right with her about how easily Ryan folded. Turns out Ryan had been recording conversations illegally between himself and Grace, but not to blackmail her, to frame her. In one audio file, he was coaching her through lines, forcing her to say things on a call that made her sound like she was aware of the fraud. He planned to leak it if she ever turned on him. That's what the anonymous letter meant. It wasn't a warning. It was a trigger. Ryan had sent it from inside lockup using a third party. Even behind bars, he was still trying to destroy her. I was shaking. Not from rage. From something deeper. A kind of sorrow I didn't know how to name. He was my grandson. My own blood. And he had become something I couldn't recognize. Something I couldn't fix. Ruth placed a hand on my shoulder. "We can expose him." I shook my head slowly. "We will." That night, I made one final decision. I wrote Ryan a letter. I didn't write to forgive him. Or shame him. I wrote to tell him who I was. And who he could have been. You looked at my life and thought I was weak. You saw the cane, the scars, the long hours, and thought all of it meant I was finished. But strength is not measured by how many men you step on. It's measured by how many you carry when they're too tired to walk. You could have led this family. You could have rebuilt everything. But instead, you tried to erase the very hands that made your future possible. You thought I was too old to matter. But I'm still the one who runs this family. Not because I control it, but because I protect it. And even now, I still love you. But I won't save you. Ruth filed the new evidence. The DA reopened the case. Charges were expanded against Ryan: conspiracy, coercion, and malicious manipulation of evidence. Grace was cleared entirely. My own charges? They were dropped. Turns out, The truth always finds its way through. Even if it takes time. Even if it crawls. By the end of the year, the Carter Legacy Program had grown to 300 students. A second campus opened. Retired veterans and old tradesmen came out of their loneliness to teach. One man, 91 years old, taught welding with hands that still shook, but his students loved him. Grace took over as executive director. Ruth became our legal chair. And me? I just became Grandpa Carter to everyone. And I was okay with that. But then, just when we thought the dust had settled, a phone call came. A short, cold voice. I'm calling on behalf of Ryan Carter. He wants to see you. One-on-one. No lawyers. No press. I said nothing. Will you come? I stared at the floor and said 2 words. Tell him. Tell him I'll be there. The line went dead before I could say anything else. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window in my old wooden chair, watching the moon rise slow and pale over the hills. The same hills I used to carry Ryan over on my shoulders when he was too small to keep up with Grace and Ruth. I remembered the sound of his laughter back then. Wild. Free. That sound had vanished years ago. Now all that was left was the man who tried to burn his own family to the ground. I didn't know what he wanted from me, but I knew this much: I needed to look him in the eye. Not as a broken old man, not as someone begging for peace, but as the man who still ran this family. Even if it was from the shadows. The prison wasn't far. About 45 minutes west of town, past the dry riverbed and out near the old factory ruins. They brought me through security like I was a ghost. No one said a word. One guard, a young man with thick glasses, looked at me and whispered, "Thank you for what you did for my cousin. He's in your program." I nodded, too choked up to speak. They led me to a narrow visitor's room. Plexiglass, table, 2 chairs, and a single red phone on each side. Then Ryan walked in. He looked thinner. Eyes sharper. Like someone who had lost comfort but found clarity. He picked up his phone. I picked up mine. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, "You're not dead yet." Nope. I figured after all that, the scandal, the trial, I'd see your face in an obituary before I saw it here. You don't get to write my ending, Ryan. A pause. Then a bitter chuckle. Still as stubborn as ever. No, I said. I'm just not as afraid of you as you hoped I'd be. Ryan leaned back, his jaw tight. Do you hate me? I looked at him for a long moment. I don't hate you, son. I hate what you became. And I hate that somewhere along the line, you stopped believing in who you could be. He looked away. I leaned forward. You think all this makes you powerful? Manipulating Grace, framing your own blood, throwing dirt on the only people who ever loved you. I shook my head. That's not power. That's cowardice dressed in expensive clothes. His lips twitched. You think you're better than me? No, I said. I think I'm older than you, which means I've already made more mistakes than you even understand. But I learned from mine. You're still using yours as a weapon. His eyes narrowed. So what, are you here to save me now? To offer redemption? I shook my head. No. I'm here to let you know I stopped trying. He flinched. Just slightly. I spent too many years thinking I could fix you. Thinking if I worked harder, loved stronger, gave more, you'd come back. But this isn't about coming back. This is about who you chose to be. He said nothing. I lowered my voice. And the truth is, you're no longer my burden. Ryan's breathing changed. Shallow. Uneven. For the first time in his life, I saw fear in his eyes. Not of prison. Not of me. But of irrelevance. He asked quietly, is the company still mine? I leaned in close to the glass. No, son. It never was. When I walked out of that room, I didn't look back. Some men need to lose everything before they realize what they had. Others never realize it at all. And that's the tragedy of it. Because they live their whole lives thinking the world owes them something, when really the world gave them everything they ever needed. They just refused to open their hands. In the months that followed, life moved forward. The Carter Legacy Program expanded to 2 more towns. One of the graduates, a 22-year-old named Jonah, became our youngest licensed contractor. He told me at graduation that when he was homeless and angry, it was my story that pulled him out of it. Not my strength. Not my company. My story. I realized then, people don't remember your achievements. They remember your endurance. They remember how you stood when it all fell apart. Grace grew stronger too. She no longer flinched when Ryan's name was mentioned. She led with compassion but refused to be naive again. She held herself with a quiet kind of fire now. Like her mother. And Ruth? She met someone. A good man. A little younger than her, sharp as a whip. I saw the way her eyes lit up when he walked in the room. It made me wonder if maybe there was still room for love, even for me. Then one day I received a letter from the prison. Ryan again. I almost didn't open it. But something in me, maybe the part that will always be a father, a grandfather, made me tear the seal. Inside were just a few lines. I see it now. I see what you were trying to teach me. I'm not asking for anything. Just wanted you to know. I'm sorry. And I'm trying. For real this time. No signature. Just a scribbled drawing of a pipe wrench. I laughed. Cried. Then folded the letter and placed it in Clara's old recipe box. But don't get me wrong. Not everything got tied up neat and clean. Some nights, I still wake up sweating, hearing old arguments, replaying words I can't take back. I still walk with a limp. My memory's not what it used to be. And the world, it's louder than ever, faster, less patient. But you know what? Every time someone tells me I'm too old to matter, I smile. Because they don't see the roots. They only see the leaves. They don't see the foundation, the old hands that still hold this family together. They don't see the long nights I sat up waiting for Grace to come home safe. The fights I had with doctors when Ruth broke her wrist and they wouldn't listen. The time I took Ryan's little body in my arms after he fell off his bike and whispered, "You're gonna be okay." They don't see that. But I remember, and I carry it, every damn day. Because I'm not just the old man who fixes pipes. I'm the spine of this family. I'm the reason the walls are still standing. And one day when I'm gone, they'll look back. They'll tell my story. And they'll know without a shadow of a doubt. He's the reason we're still here. I never thought much about what my funeral would look like. Never pictured the flowers, the photos, or the people that might show up. I just always assumed I'd go quietly like the end of an old song everyone forgot was still playing. But that day, standing in the back of the community hall, watching my own memorial service, I realized something. I wasn't dead. Not yet. Let me explain. A few weeks ago, Ruth came to me with an idea. "Let's throw you a living tribute," she said, as casually as if she was talking about a birthday party. "Give people a chance to say what they need to say while you're still here." I scoffed at first. "I'm not dying." She smirked. "No, but you've scared us all enough times to plan ahead." "Fair enough." So we did it. She called it Legacy Day. I wasn't sure who would show up. Turns out, everyone did. The hall was filled with old classmates, construction workers I hadn't seen in decades, students from the Legacy program, city officials, and every single one of my grandchildren. Except Ryan. But that was okay. Some things you let be. One by one, they stood and told stories. Some made me laugh. Some made me cry. Some reminded me of things I'd completely forgotten. Like the time I helped rebuild a widow's house after her roof caved in during a flood. I never took payment. Just left her a note that read, "One day, you'll help someone else. That'll be enough." Apparently, she did. She'd gone on to start a nonprofit for disaster victims. Because of me. I sat there holding Grace's hand, Ruth at my side, and thought, maybe this is what it means to live forever. Not through monuments, not through money, but through impact. When the speeches ended, Jonah, the young welder from our program, stood on the stage. He took a deep breath and said, "I used to think I was worthless. I grew up thinking I wouldn't make it past 20. But Mr. Carter, Grandpa Carter, he looked at me like I mattered. Even when I messed up. Especially when I messed up. I never had that before. He turned to me, eyes shining. You didn't just change my life. You saved it." I couldn't look away. It hit me harder than any recognition, any award. I had seen this boy. And he had seen me too. Later that night, when everyone had gone home, I stayed behind in the empty hall. The lights were low. The chairs stacked. I stood on the stage for a long time, listening to the silence. Then I whispered, almost to myself, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular. Just to life. For giving me one more chapter than I thought I deserved. But life had one more surprise. 2 days after Legacy Day, I received a call from the prison. Ryan had been transferred to a rehab facility as part of a pilot reform program. Behavioral therapy. Emotional accountability. He had volunteered. I didn't know what to think. But then, a week later, a small envelope arrived. Inside was a drawing. Crude, done in pencil, smudged at the edges. It was of a house. A small one. The kind you'd see in a modest neighborhood. With flowers, porch, and a mailbox that read, Carter and Son Repairs. Underneath, in shaky handwriting, were 4 words. Still trying. Still learning. No name. But I knew. I didn't hang it on the wall. I taped it inside the lid of my old toolbox, where it belonged. A few months passed. Spring came. The Legacy Center held its biggest graduation yet. Over 500 people. Young, old, men, women, people who had been written off by everyone. Now walking across a stage with heads high and eyes forward. I was asked to say something. I stood up. The crowd quieted. I looked out at them, some with tears, some grinning like kids at Christmas. And I said this. They told me I was too old to matter. They said I was done, finished, used up. But I'm still here. And I'll keep showing up for every person who thinks they're too broken to build again. Because age doesn't make you obsolete. It makes you a blueprint. After the ceremony, one of the youngest students, a 17-year-old girl named Millie, ran up to me. She hugged me hard, then looked up and asked, Mr. Carter, what do you do when nobody believes in you? I knelt even though my knees screamed. And I said, you believe harder. You fight smarter. And when you run out of strength, you borrow some from people like me who've been through the fire and came out standing. She nodded slowly, wiping her face. Then whispered, I want to be like you one day. I smiled. You will. But don't just be like me. Be better. Go further. Build higher. That night, I sat in my study and opened Clara's old scrapbook. Found a photo from our wedding. She looked like the sunrise. I kissed the edge of the photo and said, we did good, didn't we, love? I leaned back in my chair, the fire cracking low. My hands were worn. My back ached. But my heart? My heart was full. Because even after all the pain, the betrayal, the losses, I had given this family something more valuable than wealth. I had given them strength. I had given them hope. And I had proven, without a doubt, that they were wrong. I was never too old to matter. Because in the end, I'm still the one who runs this family.